It is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
God bless Jerusalem, the eternal, undivided capital of Israel.
I saw your report this morning on the Endtimes.com site.
I haven't seen that.
I hadn't watched the Netanyahu speech he gave to Congress. It was pretty amazing. You did a good job of setting it up and talking about the importance of the speech. Any live thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting because, as I noted in the report, I did not expect to really feature the speech itself. Like you, I hadn't listened to it. I'd heard excerpts and so forth. But there have been a lot of very interesting Israeli reactions to the speech, and that's what I thought I was going to make the report about. But as I looked at the speech myself for the first time, and really because I was editing it, uploading it, and all that, I spent a lot of time in it, and I realized it really is a great teaching tool. It addresses all of the objections that the protesters and Israel naysayers have right now. So anyway, I thought it was a really helpful tool. The thing on this end, the other side of the rest of the story, I guess you could say, is that in Israel, there's appreciation for what he said, but there's also a memory that goes back 20 years over him saying very, very similar things. Like in 2014, he said, "I will not allow Gaza to survive. We will remove Gaza. We will get Gaza out." Well, it didn't happen. And there's a lot of sentiment here that is not happy with him because he has never accepted any responsibility for the breathtaking failure of intelligence and security on October 7th. He keeps kicking that can down the road, saying we will do an investigation later. And this is the first time he's had a government. He's been prime minister several times. And this is the first time he's had a government without a moderating component that would maybe the center. This time his coalition is entirely dependent on what Israelis would label as far right, ultra-Orthodox and they would say ultra-conservative parties. What that means here is a number of things. There are two kinds of ultra-Orthodox here. The primary, perhaps the biggest group are those you see dressed in black, black hats and long black coats, and they're the Haredim, and they are divided up into many, many different smaller groups and sects, if you will. Some of them can be almost cult-like. But one thing that characterizes almost all of them is that they do not serve in the IDF. And because of their focus on studying Torah, the income that comes in for most of these families comes from women working, and it's very, very low level of income. And all of the yeshivas, these schools or seminaries, we might call them, that teach the study of Torah are funded to a great degree by the government. And so you have the Haredim here getting all kinds of social benefits from the state of Israel, and yet in its hour of greatest need, refusing to serve in the military.
What can they do to spur more activity? I mean, it seems like Netanyahu is just your typical politician using
Yeah.
these sorts of moments to, you say, kick the can down the street, but he's really using it to bolster his stature in the world sphere.
Yeah.
And when he's
And at
standing in
home.
front,
Yeah.
yeah, when he's standing in front of, all the most important people in DC. Well, first of all, let me just say that paratrooper, that story about him running 8 miles, grabbing a gun, that needs to be turned into some sort of movie. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. To me, that was the most moving thing, was to see these IDF soldiers, right? And I thought
yes.
it was really, really powerful that we saw a Bedouin Muslim soldier who fights for Israel. He's Israeli, you know.
Hmm.
We saw the Ethiopian Jewish Israeli who ran 8 miles. We saw another guy, and I don't know what, I think he's Jewish, but he was in the tank division, you know, and he'd lost his vision in an eye and lost an arm. He's going back in. And
Hmm.
then for me, the most moving thing was to see the fourth soldier who had a leg blown off, right? And he's standing there, and he lifts his forearm crutch, you know, and he goes like this.
Hmm.
I just tell you what, that was just really, really moving. And I thought it was powerful because it also showed that Israeli IDF soldiers are not monolithic. They're not all the same. They come from a whole variety of different backgrounds, including, poignantly now, a lot of Druze officers. The Druze are a minority, a significant minority sect here in Israel. They generally have their own communities, but they are fiercely loyal to the country. And Israel really loves its Druze population. They serve in the armed forces. They give their lives for Israel. They fight for Israel. For them to have a community hit by a rocket from Hezbollah on Saturday and have 12 children killed is
It doesn't
mind-blowing.
seem to be making the news rounds like it should. I mean, like, that's a very, very horrific event. I mean, especially if you kind of continue on the storyline of October 7th, it just adds to the terrorism that's happening over there and the innocent lives that are being devastated. And that, I think the story, that they had 11 kids that were known to be deceased, but one of the kids was directly hit by the rocket, so they couldn't identify the body. And you're talking about little children, and these storylines just sort of seem to become very callous, almost like they have no feeling to them anymore because they're so repetitive and so redundant, of just this torturing process of what's next in the Middle East related to, terrorist attacks on Israelis, but not just Israeli soldiers, but Israeli citizens. And so, what is the sentiment over there right now? Because what I picked up from the show today was Netanyahu again is not really tackling this full time. Like, you sent me a link via WhatsApp on kind of the storyline over there of, like, when is it going to actually become an issue where somebody addresses it right now, because it's a big story.
Well, that's the frustration right now. On the one hand, historically, Israel has always, in the past, before October 7th, when they've been attacked, they have responded quickly and forcefully, and generally its wars have been over, these conflicts have been over in a matter of weeks, days, weeks. Since after October 7th, it took ages for Israel to respond. I mean, for at least 8 hours or more, terrorists had free reign, uninhibited free reign in the south near Gaza. And that still is just mind-boggling to people. Why weren't there helicopters? Why weren't there any jets that came, or any IDF forces? They were gone. I mean, they were not gone. They were just absent. There was nobody there. Nobody responded. And why? What took so long? And it's very, very frustrating. And now, with what's happened up north in Majd al-Shams, the Druze community that got hit by the rocket, the Druze are saying this is our October 7th. That's what they're saying today. And
Rightfully
yet
so. Rightfully so. That's devastating.
absolutely.
I think related to the attacks and everything going on. Not to make this all conspiracy theory style, but we're talking about, Bible prophecy on Tipping Point a lot. Endtimes.com is all about kind of how Bible prophecy is unfolding in the news headlines. There's this weird, almost puppeteering happening because there's things you can't explain why there's not more of a visceral reaction to things that seem so obvious. For example, yesterday it was released that the Secret Service had a 2-hour heads up about the shooter, the assassination attempt on Trump. They had identified him 2 hours before it even happened, and so there's this knowledge, and there's like almost you're just watching. I'm not talking about the people there because there was people by the bar or whatever, and next to the event, like pointing at the shooter, saying, "Hey, there's a guy with a rifle on the roof." But the Secret Service and the FBI, there's people there that knew there was a guy there that had been identified. He got off 6 shots, and in a real life scenario, that just doesn't happen. Like you're just wondering who's like portraying that there's a sense of safety when really they're like letting this thing play out politically. I feel the same way with some of the stuff related to that because my dad and I were invited to go to DC earlier this year to watch like the real footage from October 7th. They had pieced it all together. And we went to the Israeli embassy. It was obviously very somber. There was about maybe 75 to 100 people that were invited to come watch it firsthand. It was something that you really can't put out there. You've seen clips of it, right? But I mean, it's so horrific. You can't really put it out there. And very, very sobering. And I think Netanyahu did a good job of utilizing that to showcase if you're pro-Hamas, you're cheering the murdering of babies and
Exactly.
beheading of
Yeah.
men and raping of women.
Yeah.
Like that's what you're cheering for. And I saw the footage. You can't fake the footage because it was straight from the body cams of the Hamas
terrorists. Right.
terrorists.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those mind-boggling things. And then you see that, but why isn't there more of a concerted effort to root out that, knowing how horrific it is? Because in America, when we got attacked, there was a massive campaign to get bin Laden to go in and try and to disrupt all the terrorist cells, ISIS, whoever was like becoming a threat to us. And I just don't. It seems like with everything going on in the Middle East, there's a lot more politics than there should be related to some of these horrific massacres.
Well, we're seeing that here. I mean, the Lloyd Austin in the U.S. is encouraging Israel not to quote unquote overreact to the bombing of Druze children, the murder of Druze children in the north. And the frustration, there's a big frustration here that we've not yet acted. Israel has historically acted quickly in response to things like this, and now we're moving very, very slowly. Why hasn't anything happened yet? It seems to me a lot of this is coming from Western pressure and a Western also paradigm that the path to peace, the best path to peace is negotiation. That people are basically good, and if we're just nice enough, if we just show them that we care and we are willing to look at things from their perspective, well, they'll come around and we can be friends that disagree on things. The thing of it is, here in the Middle East, it's exactly the opposite of that. I work out at a gym where most of the other guys that come to work out are Palestinians. And I don't know, last week I think it was, one of them, they all know I'm the American there. And so one of them came up to me and said, so what do you think about this Trump? Trump, what do you think about Trump? And I kind of just, well, interesting. Because this was right after he'd been shot. He said, well, yeah, he showed a lot of chutzpah. Well, I didn't say that because that would not be good. I didn't say chutzpah. That's a Hebrew thing. But I said, yeah, he showed a lot of courage, a lot of guts. Yeah, Trump is great. Trump was awesome. And I'm telling you that story because it illustrates so well how people here respond to strength, right?
Mm.
When they see demonstrations of strength, there is respect. If he had stayed on the ground, and most of us would have done, yeah, there would have been no respect. I mean, okay, whatever, okay. But because he got up and he did this, right, and said fight, well, profound respect.
With a bloody ear, with blood on his face.
The bloody, oh yeah, yeah. And the same thing's true here. When the West says to Iran or Hezbollah, which is of course a proxy of Iran, when it says, oh, we want to make peace, let's negotiate, we can make it out, they know they've won. I mean, one argument that is very, very powerful here right now is that what Hezbollah has learned so far after murdering 12 children is that they can get away with it. There really won't be a meaningful reaction. They're going to survive, and they can continue to pound the North. Just a few minutes ago, within the last hour, hundreds of rockets have been rained down, again, by Hezbollah in the North. And it's 80,000 people have been evicted from their homes. I was up there a few weeks ago at the community called Kiryat Shmona, which is a very, very beautiful town, right up near the border. Now, when you say near the border, geographically, it's a big mountain there between them and Lebanon. It's not at all like Gaza, which is flat and sandy. This is a mountain up north. It's a mountainous, rocky area, geography. But Kiryat Shmona, when you go in, it could be any nice, medium, small town in America with shopping malls and, it's abandoned. There were probably 20% of the people were there. The people that have basically stayed up, the Israelis that have stayed up north and have not evacuated their homes have largely been farmers. I mean, they've got to plant their crops and they've got to try to, hopefully, they're hoping that they can harvest them, or some of them too. But it's, people cannot live. They cannot live in their homes. And what that means is, for the first time in Israel's history, the enemy is dictating how things proceed, instead of Israel saying, no, you can't do this. And Israel has effectively lost sovereign control over the north of Israel. It's a situation that just can't continue. It's a very, very troubling thing.
Well, I would say that there's a lot of, just consistent news, even in the Western news about Israel. Even yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, Israel approves a retaliatory strike on Hezbollah. Diplomats scrambled to avert all-out war after a rocket attack that killed 12 young people in the Golan Heights. It's major news, and it's almost like it just becomes, a norm to report it, to kind of talk about, the highlights of what's happening. But you're there. We talked about this last week on a call, but the psychology of people there is completely different whenever you have rockets raining down and you have the potential of terrorist attacks. It feels very, I know this very safe over in Israel. There's certain parts that are very safe. But just the psychology of it, just speak to that just for 2 seconds on kind of how the people literally on the ground there are reacting to this.
Everywhere in the country, there is trauma, even among everywhere. And that includes people who don't live near Gaza or in the north near Lebanon. And the reason, it's a lot of reasons, but everybody here knows somebody who has died in Gaza, or they know somebody who knows somebody. And everybody knows somebody who's been injured or wounded in Gaza. And there is a connection to hostages, there's a cultural connection to people here that's very different from the U.S. In the U.S., if you had a bunch of, soldiers maybe taken, there wouldn't be that keen sense of identification. Here, everybody looks at the hostages and sees them as family. Even if they don't know them, they're felt. There's a visceral connection. And so the fact that these hostages have now been held for what, 8 months, something like that,
Crazy.
9 months, is just unbelievable. One report yesterday said from a hostage who's released is that she was used by by Hamas terrorists as if she was a sex doll.
I saw that. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, and it's like what these people are suffering and have suffered, and now I saw another report today too that said estimates are that half of them are still alive. Well, that means half of them have died in captivity, and they've died
Can't
underground,
imagine.
they've died in darkness, they've died in abuse. It's just it's mind-boggling.
What you witnessed with the October 7th, it was like Genghis Khan style savagery. There was no humanity to the whole process. It wasn't civil. It wasn't even if you wanted to kill somebody, they weren't killing people like in a civil fashion. It was rape and torture them before you kill them.
Absolutely.
Beheading somebody is, especially when you're witnessing somebody else be beheaded, it is mental torture, and then it's physical torture, and then it's just the most gruesome death. I think going back to an article you sent me in the Jerusalem Post, there was a line in it. Israel is ignoring its situation like a patient in denial of a medical diagnosis. You had highlighted that line. And when will they start to get out of not denial in Egypt, but denial, as in
right, as in
when
the severity of the situation.
the mental
I don't
disorder?
know.
Yes.
I mean, and as I recall that article, it was referring to the situation with Hezbollah, that there will be a war. It has to happen. If not sooner, it will happen later. They're gearing up for this. They're armed for this to the teeth. I have sympathy on the one hand, though. I mean, how can Israel do a war on two fronts? I mean, there are not many people here. And so when you talk about the IDF, boots on the ground, we really don't have the personnel to go into Lebanon. Certainly not while we're at the same time in Gaza. The only way to attack right now, it seems to me, is by using aerial bombings or sending rockets in, and the whole terrain, because it's rocky and mountainous, is very different than the war has been down in Gaza. It's estimated that Gaza has a tunnel system every bit as large and sophisticated as the one in Gaza, which was mind-bogglingly something like 500-600 miles of tunnels. But the ones that Hezbollah has are in rock. You're not going to collapse them very easily.
When you say tunnels, are you saying tunnels that are more sophisticated in nature, or are they built out with lighting? I'm not saying they have,
some of them that were discovered a couple of years ago, you could drive trucks through. So they have passageways where they can drive vehicles and transport weapons from one part of Lebanon to another. It's not known. At least it's not publicly known how large and sophisticated it is. The assumption, however, I think has to be that it is large and sophisticated and very, very dangerous, and it will be incredibly difficult to defeat. If we've had so much trouble with it because of the tunnels in Gaza, how much more with up north? And I don't think we can do it I don't think Israel can do it on its own. It may have to try.
How do you trust anybody over there? I mean, I would think that there would be, because there's so many, moles, or there's so many, spies. There's just so much that can infiltrate communities. I was talking to somebody that worked at a government agency here. It's a nuclear plant in West Texas, where I was from, and they said that out of 4,000 people that worked at this facility, it was always known that a certain percentage are spies from China or Russia. Like you just know that you are going to have a mathematical, so at some point you're entertaining spies. People have been transplanted, they've grown up in your community, but they are working and active in getting information back to their mother country. And that's in certain pockets around here, but over there the spaces are so small, and the merger of all these communities, Middle Eastern communities, are so kind of real, because you don't have to drive very far to go to a very hostile area. How do you end up trusting, like you're working out with Palestinians, and how do you end up trusting that they're not going to at some point identify you as someone they want to target?
No, I think that's exactly the point. In fact, that's exactly what happened with Gaza. Gaza citizens were every day coming into Israel, and they were working in these very communities that were attacked, and they were doing they were taking care of the children, they were working in the fields, they were house cleaning, they were doing all kinds of work outside, in these Jewish communities. What we now know is they took intelligence back, and they told Hamas operatives exactly where the rooms were, where to go, who to hit, and so these people that were in fact embraced, come work, we'll pay you. You get better money here than you do there, and we'll put you in our hospitals, we'll take care of you. They turned on them. And Israelis are very, very aware of this, mainly because of what happened in Nazi Germany, where a whole culture turned against them. And so there is a combination of awareness, more of awareness here, maybe among Jews in other countries, what we call a diaspora or diaspora. Maybe there's still some residual denial. It's hard to leave a country. Right now, there are calls for Jews in France to come here, and understandably so. It's hard for them, though.
Well, I noticed yesterday that 3 Palestinians were arrested at the USA border getting in illegally, and they were tied to the terrorist groups.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was thinking about that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you think it's a half a world away, but it's right in our backyard right now, and they're coming over, and you're wondering what they're trying to do to gather information, intelligence, what they're trying to attack. They're very angry with the West in some regards. They see us as, the great Satan sometimes still, and they don't like what we stand with Israel, and they want to make their mark. And you wonder, it doesn't even have to be a massive bombing. It could be a mall shooting or something that's taking out innocent lives. That's what they want, is to create terror and fear. Yeah. And you think it's going to be so far away from you, but really it could be right out of our back door with them crossing the border, our southern border illegally. And we have a border just like y'all that's very porous, tunnel systems, and the cartel is getting drugs across. And it's nothing new to have a porous border. But whenever you have a border that you have the intelligence and the border patrol there, and you have drone surveillance, and you have the ability with certain levels of technology to keep your border secure. And when the government is actively almost turning a blind eye to it because they just can't deal with the situation, if you go down there and try to take on the cartel, you're going to lose, unless you're just willing to fight a ground war for years to eradicate all of the criminal underground. Because there's always new leaders wanting to pop up. It's the same way over in the Middle East. If you kill one massive terrorist leader, there's another one waiting to take its place, unless you just eradicate the whole, really have to eradicate the whole civilization of that ideology, and that's impossible to do.
Right. Yeah, it's the whack-a-mole problem.
Very much so.
I have recently been thinking about the tunnel system that was discovered in Hamas and totally took Israel off guard for 15 years or more. Hamas kind of developed, okay, we're here to administrate, and we're going to rattle our swords, and we're going to give Israel a problem now and then. But they played it perfectly so that Israel basically began to believe, or did believe, that, okay, we can work with these people, they're not our friends, every now and then we're going to have some conflict. To discover on October 7 or shortly after, 500 miles of tunnels, and knowing that it had been constructed and developed over the whole 15-plus year period. To me, this may be a metaphor of what's happening in the West. I don't know if you saw, a few days ago, Germany shut down one of the biggest, prettiest mosques in the country because their intelligence uncovered that it was a center for the Iranian spying on Germany.
I saw that. Yeah. No duh.
And so it made me think, well, look, what if Iran has metaphorically tunneled into Europe and in the U.S.? And it's happened just like it did in Gaza, out of sight. It's happening covertly. But there is a massive effort to build infrastructure that is unseen, that at some point can be unleashed. I'm not saying this I'm not trying to promote any kind of conspiracy theory, except perhaps an Iranian one, because it has stated openly its desire to destroy not just Israel, but the great Satan, as they call it, of the United States. And so seeing these Palestinians captured at the U.S. border, I think it was in San Diego, and then reading about some of the testimony of border agents there who say, we can't control it. I can't. Mm-hmm. One guy said, I came to work here to try to, protect the country, and I know now I'm letting terrorists in.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's a very, very disturbing situation, and I don't know what the answer is. I think the first thing we have to do is wake up to the problem, and realize, okay, when Israel has heard Iran, Hezbollah, all for years talk about we're gonna kill you, we're gonna destroy you, and you kind of got used to it. Here we okay, well, that's what they're saying, and they have to say it for their own population, for their political positions and power with their people. Israel doesn't do that. Israel now realizes viscerally realizes what they've said they mean. They mean to destroy us. And I think that awareness needs to come to the West, like it is. Well, it still perhaps hasn't fully happened here, but it has happened a lot.
Yeah, it's not good. Religious ideologies can really skew people's behavior, even good people, when they have fault lines that they have to pick. You've seen it and some of it's extreme groups on the far right or the far left, but they really do dangerous things because of an ideology. And I had an idea for a novel like 15 years ago, which was called Turn Now. And I just had this vision of like us as Americans all being together, and all of a sudden there's a certain percentage of us that just turn on each other, because of religious ideologies. And it was really like the Christian Muslim vibe, this idea after 2001 when we had September 11th, you felt a sense of unity as Americans, but then you also felt a sense of confusion on what people actually believe. Because I still remember images after 9/11 of people. I remember there's a Palestinian woman who was celebrating.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Towers being hit.
They did. Oh, absolutely. It's happened. All in Gaza. In Gaza, they were celebrating. In the so-called West Bank here, Palestinian territories, they were celebrating, handing out candy. Yeah, absolutely.
And so you see parades and all these protests that are pro-Hamas. Yeah. And it's the same vibe, but that's happening on our soil, and you kind of wonder who's standing with you, who's not going to be with you. If push comes to shove, like who's actually on your side, or who's going to side with the religious ideology, not the patriotism of the national country that you're representing. Let's talk about the Olympics. Speaking of national,
Yeah.
groups. So there was a story. This was on the Jewish Breaking News Instagram. It says Karma, spoilt sport Nurali Imamali, a Tajikistani judo competitor, refused to shake hands with Israeli judoka Baruch Shamalov, shouting Allahu Akbar instead. In his next fight after that, Imamali faced a Japanese judoka and ended up with a dislocated shoulder and in tears. He fell back on his arm. It's really embarrassing, I think, for a lot of those competitors when they won't even acknowledge Israeli competitors, and then this guy dislocated his shoulder. It's pretty brutal. And we may post this in the video that we're going to put online, but on Instagram you can see it. In this next match, the guy just totally falls back on his left arm, and it looks like, I thought he broke it, but I guess it just dislocated his shoulder. It's pretty gruesome. Don't watch it. But there's this sentiment out there that you can't really do that for a lot of groups, but you can do that for the Jewish competitors. Like you see this blatant anti-Semitism happening on the world stage, and everyone just seems like it's just another day.
Well, in fact, the report I saw this afternoon, for me, it's afternoon here, it said that I believe it was a soccer match. They call it football here, but a soccer match between Israel and I think it was Portugal. There were fans in the stands screaming "Heil Hitler," "Heil Hitler," and holding up Palestinian flags. There have been regular threats against individual Israelis. They come by email, they come by text messages. They're getting in. We're going to kill you. Yeah, come. Remember what happened in Munich? Some of these texts are saying Munich, 1972, I think it was, when all those Israeli athletes were attacked and killed. All unfolded on TV. So. Yeah, I really admire these athletes right now, and I think they really deserve prayer cover. They need us to intercede for them because they are targets, and they have walked directly into the bullseye of the world right now. And if there's ever any kind of platform that terrorists would like to use, it's that, because it's a global platform. So it's not good.
Yeah, and you go back to Bible prophecy and just the fact that a singular group of people like that are being targeted at a massive scale. I mean, you're seeing it not just from one country like the Palestinian groups. You're seeing it now from all types of European countries, all types of global sentiments towards Israeli people. And really, I feel like, in this moment, you're witnessing firsthand sort of an awareness that this people in the small little country in the Middle East are going to be the focal point for a while. And you're doing a great job of reporting on it. It's been a great kind of journey with you recently on Endtimes.com to see your reporting. And even today with the Netanyahu piece, even though that could be watched somewhere else, your analysis on it's very telling, because you live over there, you see things differently firsthand, how people are talking about it, how they're, praising Trump's courage, how they're probably frustrated with Netanyahu's, sleight of hand. Hey, I'm going to talk about this, but we're not really going to do anything about it. It's sort of all just ear candy, making people feel good. But at the end of the day, it's just politics.
Well, I'll tell you what, one reason to watch Netanyahu's speech in my report is that simply by removing the applause, I cut the time of watching it in half.
Yeah.
So if you want it to be a real efficient look at what he had to say, watch what I posted, because it goes by much faster. But of course, you can watch it.
Yeah, you're a savant. You can do the reporting and you can do the editing. And you can do the uploading. You're a one-man band, so it's actually really good. All right, well, we'll talk again about what's going on in the news. Today was helpful. I enjoyed kind of hearing more about your perspective on some of the stuff that I know you do the reporting, but behind the scenes, what's going on actually with the recent rocket attack in Hezbollah, and just kind of the general sense of what's in the mind and heart over there, and then I guess next week we can talk. Next time we talk, we'll talk about what you're going to talk about next week. Kind of give a preview of some things coming out. So anyway,